If you didn't enjoy school, you probably hated it. Long hours, boring teachers, and oh, so many rules. The rules especially always seemed to be pointless and covered things that nobody thought was important. Today we're showing you the most ridiculous school regulations ever. Here at TheHUB, all of our rules are in place for a good reason. So before we start, follow our primary rule of clicking the subscribe button. And as a reward, we'll let you watch all of our great videos. Prison jumpsuits for bad behavior. One school in Texas has taken school rules one step too far by making their bad students wear prison jumpsuits. And these aren't just styled in the same design, but actually designed by prisoners from the local jail. If that doesn't scare you into working hard and achieving good grades, then nothing will. The school in Gonzales, around 70 miles east of San Antonio, has ordered 82 overalls for only the worst behaved students to suffer in. The school has 2,650 students in total, so it seems like they're hoping the majority of students are well behaved, because otherwise they're going to run out of overalls pretty quickly. The students who have to wear the overalls are those who don't follow the uniform guidelines. But there's an escape clause, because students who bring a spare change of clothes with them can simply change into those instead. But obviously, who brings a spare pair of pants into school with them anymore? We think it's a pretty smart idea, but maybe a bit over the top. Wearing a skirt an inch too short isn't going to land you in prison after all. We haven't yet seen it implemented in any other schools, but there's still time. No physical contact. Okay, so we can understand why rules like this exist, to an extent. Kids can be brutal and start arguments that then lead to fights, and no one wants a bleeding nose or a black eye to end their day of learning. So no physical contact could seem like quite a smart rule, you'd think. But some schools take it a bit too far. What's one of the most common ways kids celebrate when they've done something they're proud of? With a high five or a fist bump, of course. But some schools have banned these, thinking they can condone violence and encourage kids to be rough with each other. Some other schools have also banned high fives on the basis of exclusion, because maybe once or twice, ever, a kid has been left out from a high five. But in the grand scheme of things that a kid can come across at school that'll bring him down, we don't think missing out on a high five is up there with the worst. Maybe times have changed since we were students, but this one seems a little over the top to us. One school has actually gone all out and banned physical contact altogether, which means you'll be playing a human equivalent of the floor is lava when it comes to exchanging books or passing pens to your neighbor. Uniform guidelines. We all understand why we have to wear a uniform, in most cases at least. We know that it helps to keep people in line and stop some students being able to show off their wealth while others feel bad in comparison. So we'll admit there are benefits to wearing school uniforms, but you've got to admit that at some point it does get excessive. It varies all over the world, and while some schools are as relaxed as telling you to wear clothes of one color, others can get incredibly intricate with specific lengths, cuts, and fabrics. More and more schools are picking up on the former, and are introducing vague guidelines like telling girls their school skirts must be no more than 2 inches above the knee. This would be a good idea if all girls were exactly the same height. The problem here is the vagueness means that what's meant to be uniform actually ends up varying hugely because everyone is a different shape and size. If schools aren't fussing about the length, they're complaining about the material, because obviously there's a huge difference between patent leather and matte leather, right? One day, teachers will realize that insignificant things like this don't actually affect our learning. No groups of over 5. Life is tough when you have too many friends. How do you find the time to make sure you can talk equally to each of them so that no one gets left out and everyone is happy? It's likely a problem that most kids have stumbled across once or twice. This is also probably the reason why group games at schools are so popular. We're talking ball games and chasing games. Harmless and inclusive. What more could you want? But nope, not in all schools. In some places, hanging out in a group of 6 is banned, meaning you'll have to whittle down your friendship group to only your nearest and dearest. It sounds like a harsh rule to us too, but apparently it was started to make sure that gangs don't develop. This might sound like a good idea, but surely it's only acceptable in bad schools for kids of an older age? We can understand making sure the older kids don't intimidate the younger ones, and maybe stopping them hanging out too close together will encourage this. This might seem like a good idea, but you're only thinking that until you're the one in the group of 6 who has to leave and go find new friends. No scarves. You either love fall and winter or you hate it. There's usually no in between. But if there's one thing that everyone loves about the colder seasons, it's being able to go shopping for a new winter coat and a set of gloves and a scarf. Everyone likes to feel warm, and what better way to do this than with new clothes? Well, at some schools, you'll have to make do with only the coat and gloves, because scarves are banned. Yes, you heard us right there. In some schools, it doesn't matter how cold it is, you'll have to wrap up warm with a thick jumper and hope your neck doesn't give in to the cold instead. The reasons for this vary, but most of them fall back to violence, which seems to be the case with a lot of the rules we've found on this list. In some places, scarves are allowed in colors except red and blue, because apparently they're the most common gang colors. But in other places, they're banned completely. It's thought that wearing scarves will somehow make you look like a gang member, or maybe it'll inspire you to start your own. We're not really sure, really. No rubber bands. This is another particularly niche regulation that we found, and we're a bit intrigued as to who actually sat down and debated this with a team of school teachers. We always thought that rubber bands were just used to keep things together, like a pile of pens or maybe some flashcards. Otherwise, you wouldn't want them to fall out of your bag or stray out of their correct order, right? You'll have to study extra hard in some schools or limit your color selection because rubber bands are off limits. The thought is that students can use them for dangerous purposes, and by that we basically mean to flick them at each other. We know some students like to cause trouble at school, but come on guys, rubber bands aren't the worst weapon out there that can be used. We're not actually sure what would happen if you were caught with this type of contraband in your pockets at school, but maybe you could prove the teachers right and flick them away to prove a point. Fining students for bad behavior. Another Texas-based punishment. What is up with these kids here? A newly introduced policy has been to fine the kids who behave badly, and not just a couple of dollars, but amounts up to $500 a time. Which means after enough payments, you won't be able to afford to behave badly anymore. The research behind the new regulation was actually done by a non-profit company who noticed a rise in bad behavior in the area. We're not talking things like uniform misdemeanors here either, but real crimes that could actually have a notable effect on a student's future. So while the police were busy tackling these students' crimes, the schools thought they could help out. Why not give the police forces a break and start fining the kids themselves? It meant that the school could earn some money back, and it would hopefully act as a deterrent for bad behavior too. But they also realized that many families wouldn't be able to cough up hundreds of dollars each time their kid misbehaved. So the school also introduced things like community service, which required no money and got the students doing some real hard work instead. Electronic tagging. You might have had an identification card at school. Maybe it was used to help you take books out of the library, or perhaps you scanned through the school gates with it. Either way, it was an easy way of telling who was who at school. We all definitely made the most out of being able to laugh at each other's photos too. But while this school in Houston kept the identification part, they got rid of all the fun of laughing at bad photos, because this school in the Santa Fe district started tagging students electronically instead. This sounds a bit over the top, right? That's the kind of thing we see happening to hardened criminals, not people trying to get an education. But the school introduced it not necessarily to clamp down on bad behavior, but actually to track the students. The devices came at a cost of $150,000, and they charged each student $15 if they lost their tag. Although you'd think you could just track it to find it again, but we won't argue there. The program has been rolled out to more than 15,000 students so far, and we don't see it dying down anytime soon. No hand sanitizer without a doctor's note. As niche school rules go, this one is definitely up there with the worst. We've heard of schools banning kids from taking their own medicines without a doctor's note, because that's common sense, and we dread to think what could happen otherwise. We know that a lot of kids are sensible and would only take their own medication, but some kids aren't quite as well behaved and could easily wreak havoc with unknown substances. If nothing else, it stops the school having to have a full lockdown if a strange box of pills gets found in a locker, or something similar. So we can understand why doctor's notes are required, but in some places the schools take it too far and actually require a note for hand sanitizer. That's right, the one thing you can easily carry that's supposed to stop you getting ill. Surely if you carried hand sanitizer, you wouldn't get the opportunity to become sick and then need to declare your real medication. But some schools just aren't taking the risk. So depending on where you're educated, you might have to try and smuggle your hand sanitizer in if you're determined to stay healthy on the school grounds. No best friends. So you've already got your group down to the safe size of 5, you've sorted out your uniform, and you've coughed up some money for your fines, all while wearing your new electronic tag. School is tiring, right? What more could they do to make our experience as dull as possible? Well, some schools in the UK have banned having a best friend. That's right, now you can't even have one particular friend within your group of 5. So make sure to tell every secret to all 4 members of your mini group, because we don't want anyone getting upset, do we? It seems the schools in question were trying to get their students to play in larger groups so that everyone could remain good friends, but obviously they haven't heard about all the problems surrounding a large friendship group. Basically, no one can be friends with anyone at this rate because someone is definitely going to get upset over it. At least that way, they won't be talking in lessons and will be focusing on their studies, right? The long and short is that we just can't win. We've never been gladder that we're not in school anymore. Or perhaps you are. Let us know in the comments the weirdest rules you've had to follow at school if that's the case. We hope you enjoyed this video and we'll see you next time. Thanks!